Connections.
And welcome to Political Connections, everybody. I'm Ibeth Brusual. Well, we've turned the corner now, or decidedly, into 2016, and beyond the world of presidential politics, plenty of other races are up for grabs. And because Marco Rubio declared that if he's running for president, he would not run for re-election to that Senate seat, that opens up the seat to a wide field of contenders, one of them joining us right here in studio today, Senate candidate on the Republican side, Todd Wilcox. Thanks so much for coming in today.
Thank you, Beth. Thanks for having me.
Before we get to the issues, immigration, taxes, jobs, the economy, you name it, let's talk a little bit about yourself. You are a combat veteran, and then you moved over to the private sector, but your life has taken you around the world. Start from your humble beginnings as a child.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. No, briefly tell us about your upbringing and then how you moved into the military.
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. I've watched you several times, and it's an honor to be here. It's an interesting story. It's a story of real-world experience, and I think that applies to the political arena quite well, certainly in this time, this environment.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Tampa. I was one of 6 kids raised by a single mom in a very poor family in South Tampa. Started working when I was 13 years old at Tico as a dishwasher in the cafeteria of the Tampa Electric Company, and have been working ever since. And I was inspired by a mentor in my teenage years to get an education, that I was only going to break out of poverty if I got an education. And so I buckled down and I got an ROTC scholarship to the University of Tampa.
That's where it all began. Okay.
And that's where my service began, service to the country began. So in 89.
Okay, Army Platoon Leader, 101st Airborne Division during Desert Storm, U.S. Army Special Forces, Command Special Forces A-Team. You commanded that Special Forces A-Team in a counterterrorism role in Asia. Fast forward 1997, CIA, completed 2 years of Arabic studies. Then you started your businesses. You have 3 companies. Made by OBJ, veterans, among the veterans of influence. Why do you decide to run for public office now?
Well, if you look at the background and experience, the last 27 years of my life have been focused on America, and I'm a patriot at heart. So my time in the military gave me some really unique experiences, both as an infantry platoon leader during Desert Storm and as a Special Forces Green Beret, and then transition into the war on terrorism. So as an Arabic-speaking CIA case officer in the Middle East, pre-9/11, and then serving in combat again as a paramilitary officer with the CIA, and then finally working here in Orlando with the Joint Terrorism Task Force as the CIA officer on the Joint Terrorism Task Force with the FBI office. That's given me a very unique perspective and a lot of in-depth experience in national security and foreign policy. Then my transition in 2006, I resigned altogether from government service, and I started the first of 3 very successful businesses. And these businesses are all dedicated to America's military, economic, and diplomatic power around the world. They're 3 separate businesses that have all been very successful, and over the last 10 years, we've grown 600 jobs here in the state of Florida and around the world. And so I was really kind of focused on growing my business, providing value to my clients, both corporate and government clients.
So at what point do you say, I have these companies, but I want to run for public office? What was it that made you flip the switch and then say, I'm going to do this?
The catalyst was when Marco Rubio announced he was not going to revert back to the Senate, and Jeff Atwater and a whole list of prominent statewide name recognition, and individuals with statewide name recognition all said they weren't going to run for the office. And I saw the lineup of people who were likely going to run, and it was the same story over and over again. Career politicians looking for a promotion, having no real world work experience, no real world experience in the issues that are going to define this election, and the likelihood that we as a Republican Party might lose this seat to the Democrats. And as everybody knows, if we lose 4 seats in the Senate, we lose the Senate. The candidate field in the Republican side is made up of career politicians. I'm the only candidate in this race that has real world experience, and the only candidate that has real world experience in the issues that are going to define this election, and that's really national security and the economy.
Before we get to the economy, Mr. Wilcox, I want to ask you about the Iran deal, and this is fresh in everyone's minds. The sanctions have been lifted. Do you feel that this deal that the United States has made with Iran stops them from creating nuclear weapons?
No. In fact, it gives them a pathway. It gives them a legitimate pathway to a nuclear weapon within 10 years.
But what do you say to the argument that President Obama says, you know what, we're going to have inspectors go in there and check for, to verify if there's any kind of...
That's a false premise. They're not our inspectors. They're not even international inspectors. They're Iranian inspectors.
The IAEA?
Who come in after the Iranian inspections are done. Samples are taken by the Iranians. First and foremost, this shouldn't have been a deal. It should have been a treaty. It should have been ratified through the Congress. And this is one more example of the president stepping outside the framework of the Constitution, which is another motivation as to why I'm running for this office. We need people in the United States Senate that are going to stand up and fight for the United States Constitution, for our constitutional republic. We are moving dangerously closer and closer to a post-constitutional era where the checks and balances are nearly eroded because both politicians on the Republican and the Democratic side refuse to live up to the oath to defend the Constitution from enemies foreign and domestic.
Let me ask you this, and then we've got to move on to some of the more domestic issues, but how do you explain in layman's terms to a lot of people who look at what's happening in Iran, to look at their butting heads with Saudi Arabia as an issue that's happening halfway around the world and it doesn't impact us? What is your take on it? How do you explain to people that it does impact us in some way or another?
Well, I think if you look at San Bernardino, you can say that it impacts us. If we don't take the fight to the enemy there, we're going to fight them on the streets here in the United States. You got to understand the nuances to the Middle East, and this is another validation as to why we need to return to a citizen government, people with real-world experience. I speak the language of our enemies. I've served in the Middle East. I understand the nuances and the dynamics of the Arab culture. There has been an ongoing Cold War between Saudi Arabia and Iran for years. It's the split between Sunni and Shia Islam. And then when you overlay that with the reasons why we have straight lines in the Middle East. So the Sykes-Picot Agreement was a treaty post-Ottoman Empire after World War I that carved up the remainder of the Ottoman Empire, and it was a drunk Brit and a drunk Frenchman that sat down over a bottle of scotch with a ruler and carved up the Middle East.
But how
irrespective of ethnic or tribal or religious background and lines. And so that's why you don't have any nationalism, state nationalism in the Middle East. That feeds the tribal mosaic that makes up that culture and is a reason why we're having so many problems right now.
And because they have anti-American sentiments there, then you've got some transplants who then...
It relates to America's security and national security and public safety because they are using surrogates and recruiting here in the United States and franchising their ideology. So San Bernardino is a perfect example of why it's important to America to get it right in the Middle East now.
All right, let's talk about other issues. When it comes to jobs in the economy, the job situation in Florida is, how do you see it right now?
I take my hat off to Governor Rick Scott. He has done a fantastic job of recruiting businesses to relocate to Florida. Florida is the third largest state in the union now, and the growth of our economy is completely attributable to the work he's done on growing the job base. That said, our economy is growing at a dismal 2% per year. At least 1.5% of that potential GDP growth is bottled up in overregulation, irrational overregulation, and a tax system that's so complicated and so burdensome that it's a wet blanket on job creators. I've created 600 jobs over the last 10 years in 3 very successful businesses, and I would submit there's nobody better to defend capitalism than a successful entrepreneur. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm running for the seat.
So you're saying the economy outlook looks good in Florida, but my question is, we talk about jobs, and most politicians, or those who want to win office, talk about attracting jobs. What kind of jobs do you think need to come to Florida? What kind of jobs do you think we have, but we could do better in?
As a successful businessman and a student of capitalism, it's smart to diversify when you're on the top. And so we have a very thriving and healthy tourism business. It's time to diversify into manufacturing and logistics. We need to deepen our ports, and that will be the key to making Florida the gateway to the United States for the Supermax tankers that are coming out of the Panama Canal. We need to double down on vocational training. The average wage of manufacturing jobs is 15% higher than the median wage in Florida. And so why have we gotten away from vocational training? When I went to high school, you could take shop, you could take automotive, you could cosmetology. I mean, there was cosmetology. There was a variety of jobs you could take in lieu of going through a STEMS college track. And it seems like we've abandoned that. And I think it'll be to our peril because we need to retool.
So you say it's time to revisit that. Let's talk about immigration, shall we? That is one topic that amongst some of the top presidential Republican candidates, they seem to go back and forth in. What's your view on immigration? What's your take on it? What's your platform?
So immigration is a very important issue, both to national security and to our economy.
Is it a problem, do you think, here in Florida?
Certainly. It's a problem in Florida. It's a problem in America. It's a national security issue because we have to secure our border. And frankly, if the Democrats thought that the 12 million illegal immigrants were going to vote Republican, they would have deported them a long time ago. We need to stop playing political football with this and solve the problem. And it's not impossible. All we have to do is enforce the laws on the books. The 12 million didn't get here overnight. They broke the law getting here, and I am opposed to any amnesty or pathway to citizenship. There is certain aspects of the immigration law framework, legal framework, that can be adjusted. I think we need to do away with birthright citizenship. I think there's room in the Constitution to do that. I think we need to ban sanctuary cities and enforce the laws that are on the books. I don't understand why we give 5-year driver's licenses to people that come here on a 6-month visa. If we put in biometrics and track those people who come here on visas legitimately and know when they overstay, then we knock on their door when it comes time for them to go home.
It's a very complicated issue.
It's a complicated issue, but this notion that we're going to get it solved under comprehensive reform or nothing at all is just a tactic of the hard left progressives, because they know in this polarized environment we're in, we're not going to get comprehensive reform.
There are so many topics that we could talk about. I told you it'd go by real fast. You promise to come back?
I would definitely come back. I love it, and I appreciate the opportunity. It's a pleasure to meet you finally.
Thanks for coming in, Senate candidate on the Republican side, Todd Wilcox, here on Political Connections. And now it's time for this week's Political